Hey guys, what's up? It's schla coming back to ya with this second and final episode of Walks with Schla for Thursday, November 13th, 2025. And yeah, like I had mentioned in the car rides with Schla this morning, but actually forgot to mention, forgot to mention in the previous walks with Schla, I was going to cancel the lunchtime walks with Schla because of my beef. I kind of scheduled it a little bit wrong, so I had an awful lot. I had an awful lot to eat, and typically when that happens, all right, yeah, okay. I'm gonna put my phone on the ground for a real quick sec. All right, no, sorry, that was more like 5 seconds. My bad, but just getting my second glove on, it's always like really, very, really, really difficult. Yeah, I think buying a new phone probably not worth it. I really did probably want the 13 mini and the 512 gigabyte variant, but it's probably just not worth it. It's really not. The storage, I mean, fortunately it really hardly takes up any storage, and I'm probably just going to go on here and gut the phone. I actually should have done that already, but I've just felt so like tired, like so much stuff I have to do. I can't imagine having to be like a normal person. I feel like normal people have even less bandwidth than me. Maybe, you know what? Maybe me imagining that is finally making me realize something. Maybe that's why it's so difficult for people to just function, or I feel like overdoing it to them, because I mean, I even feel like to myself I overdo myself sometimes. Anyways, enough of the fluff. I've really had this, I thought of this earlier, and I was a little bit disappointed I didn't talk about it by lunchtime. Well, for lunchtime, but it stuck with me enough so I remember it fully. So it honestly doesn't really matter that I forgot about it. It just doesn't really matter. And basically, we've talked about this before, where there's this very tricky kind of understanding of things. Christianity teaches that everybody should be treated equally and fairly, regardless of who they are. That's kind of a common principle there. I think, again, you think about humanity, and the trademark of humanity is the potential for kindness. You don't typically see that in other forms of nature. In other forms of nature, it's just impossible. Another animal typically will just, if there's prey, it won't be friendly with the prey. Whereas humans have the ability to just, not all of us, obviously, but it's about like the potential. That's pretty interesting. So there's really, the trademark of humanity is a higher potential. It's not necessarily a higher instinct, because instinctually, I think humans are still lacking in a lot of major ways. But it really begins to beg the question, because the truth is, certain people and certain humans, due to a myriad of factors, I think I've explained before how I think my senses are stronger than most. I think my hands are very in tune to textures, high quality, the way things are shaped, the material things are made out of. I've always just loved to hold things and always had an appreciation for that. And now that I'm older, I kind of realize I just think most people, it just doesn't matter to them. Like, I mean, they might feel something that's rough and just kind of like, whatever. And then they might feel something good and think it's good, but then, they're just like, yeah, whatever. Like people really don't, it doesn't really affect people that much. And I think it has to do with like a sensory strength, basically. And that's the truth, right? When it comes down to it, there's certain people. One of the examples I use commonly is my feeling about car doors. Okay, like when I use a car, I feel the handle, I feel how the handle feels, I feel the weight of the door, how it shuts. And I always notice that, like, immediately. And it's something that I never heard anybody else even talk about, So that leads me to believe that it's either completely imperceptible to people, unperceptible. I don't know what the word for that would be. Or it's just people don't, like, they might notice, but they just would never say anything or really even care that much. And that was my whole point about like having these luxury cars, is that I would definitely appreciate it. I think in a way where I would go as far as to say most rich people just probably don't. There's a lot of rich people where really the driving force behind them purchasing a car is just like a status thing. It's kind of like you work hard so you have this thing to like show off. I don't really think there's that many. Of course, there's not none. I think there are some. But a lot of rich people just don't really appreciate it. I know that's the case for sure. They just have it to like drive really fast and go crazy with it. I mean, if you gave me a luxury car, I would baby that thing, every day when I would touch it. I would appreciate it. I would notice it. This happens with my 16 Pro Max, my iPhone 16 Pro Max. It's naked. It doesn't have a case. It's naked. And I feel it every day, and I appreciate it every day. Its texture, its finish. Now, how many people you think have a phone like that and they just never even think about it? It's covered in some junky plastic. And these are probably rich people too, but they're not grateful. They're not perceptive to these things. I even noticed the screen and how beautiful the screen is compared to my 14 Plus, and the appreciation of the texture of the glass. It feels like a very significant improvement over the 14 Plus's glass finish. The shaping, the slight curvature to the edges, as opposed to these are things like people don't even, they're not even thinking about, and I'm like, they don't even notice, they don't even care. But there's plenty of rich people who just buy the newest phone, and that's that, like they don't really do much with it. They just boom, like, they're it's a shame, right? Don't you see where I'm coming from? Now that I've outlined that, we also are obviously aware of gratitude and how much that varies. Some people are very mindful and aware of how good they have it and things like that. And they're, you remember things, you don't really take as much for granted. I tend to be in this camp. I think so much that, yes, of course, like anybody, I do end up probably taking some things for granted that I obviously can't think of, because when you take something for granted, you can't think of it. So I wouldn't be able to address the things I take for granted, because if I've taken it for granted, then I'm not thinking of them. But I'm saying that is a feature of my obsessive mind, is that, yeah, I do remember stuff. Yeah, I don't just like blow it off and take it for granted. I remember, I'm grateful, I feel things, I see things, I really appreciate the design of things. So from time to time, I just catch myself looking at my iPhone, whether it's this Product Red 13 Mini or, in the shade of red that is. And then my 14 plus, the brighter red, and how pretty they look. And, my 16 Pro Max, and how that phone looks pretty as well, and how the cameras look. I think cameras look gorgeous. I love to look at the cameras, and I do this fairly often. I feel the phone, I turn it around, I look at it from different angles as I'm walking around. Of course, with the walk, switch, schla, I can't exactly do that, but I'm talking about in my own time and in just my own way of doing things. My car, it's the same way. I mean, I look at everybody's cars, though. When I'm driving or when I'm walking, I just notice different cars, different car models, the way they look, and appreciating the different designs. And it's things that most people, I mean, they have a car, they get a car, they don't really know anything. I mean, they're just like, you know what I'm saying? Like, most people basically hardly even have a grasp of like what is even going on, right? And so this brings me to the point, and one of the biggest flaws I think in the current system is that the people who have the most money are naturally going to be greedy and power hungry and power grabby. And these people are not usually that conscious. They're usually just, again, the more aggressive type, the more go-getter. And they can grab stuff and get into positions. But I've talked about before, it's more likely than not that these type of people are not the best when it comes to being a CEO, for example, even though it's the type of person that more often than not lands that type of position. It's definitely not ideal. It's just not. And so you have this very big problem where, same thing with politicians. The type of person who wants to become a politician usually likes power. They usually like acclaim, and that's why they're in that position. And the people who actually just want to do the right thing and don't really care about power, they're usually not that interested in becoming a politician. So over time, you have more and more corrupt people writing the rules, and over time, you get to the point we're at now where, again, most of the laws are either incredibly out of date, they need to be updated, or there hasn't been new laws put on the books to help things or make things better. So it's this idea of, some people are just not grateful for stuff, and it's a mixture of how they were raised and just their biological genetics. The way I was raised, I admittedly have kind of veered off. I entered this period of just crazy indulgence, and I'm kind of hoping to reel that in for 2026. I've said this multiple times, to try to just save money and, appreciate what I have, not really get any new stuff. That's kind of the idea. And I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful about that. And so, that's kind of the idea, right? It's just, but anyways, I think though the way you were raised returns to you as you reemerge as an adult, So even though, like as a teenager and a young adult, I indulged a lot, that could have been a response to some restraint. But at the end of the day, it's possible now later in life I would return to the principles that I was taught as a child, which was you don't buy something unless you need it, etc. That was really what my parents instilled in me, just good kind of vibes. But it's also a genetic thing too, because I definitely, as I said, would not be as aware of things or as grateful for things if I didn't have the genetics that I have. If I was born into a different flesh, it just wouldn't matter, So it's kind of scary to think about that, but this is obviously an issue that is very important to solve for humanity's future, because the obvious scary thought that I think elites have is population reduction. And, you know, there's not really any reason to elaborate on that. I think you already know what elites are trying to do and what will basically, I think what is already clearly occurring. There's already proof that it's occurring. I mean, we don't have to get like conspiratorial about who's designing it or whatever, but, you know, it's obvious that some people believe in depopulation as being a way to kind of like filter out humans and stuff, but obviously there's a moral conundrum to that. That's not really, it's just not, it's not really a clear like, oh yeah, we should just do that, because you want to have compassion, and it's, you really, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to even have to bring up that topic, but for the sake of the discussion, it has to be brought up, because it's a very real possibility that there are elites scheming to pull that off. So it comes to, yeah, now we're 16 minutes in. Now I have to rush to actually get the idea I wanted to talk about in. It's this idea that, and I've talked about it before, you really shouldn't be able to have fun if you're not going to remember and enjoy it. If you're not going to remember things and you're not really going to appreciate things, you might as well just work. You might as well be put to work and get stuff done. There's not really any other ifs, ands, or buts about it, is there? Because why should a person even have one piece of candy wasted on them if they're not really going to remember it or they're not really going to appreciate it? Like, this is a legitimate thing. And I think, as I explained before, TikTok puts this on full display, because you don't remember the videos you watch, you don't really remember it, so then you really shouldn't be allowed to do it, because you're not even appreciating. It's like the thing you're doing is so strong, it's so intense, it's so quenching your boredom, it's hard to it's impossible to be grateful for something like that, you know? It's like, I don't really know how it works, but, you know, with drugs, it's kind of like a similar idea where you do something and you're in a blacked out state or a zoned out state where it feels good and the memory of it may be good, but the memory goes by in a blur. When the experience is being experienced, it goes by in a blur. And you can't actually appreciate it while it's there. It's like, it's a complicated thing to explain. So yeah, you probably shouldn't do it. But I mean, the same argument would actually apply with that. I'm sure you could look into it, and there's probably certain people who like appreciate alcohol or drugs more than others. I don't know that that's a real example. Yeah, because that actually, yeah, interestingly enough, that kind of supports what I'm saying, where it's like somebody probably shouldn't be allowed. It's not like not everybody probably just shouldn't be allowed to have beer or alcohol, and it's probably only like a small amount of people where it's like they really appreciate it and really should be allowed to, even though it's technically a vice. I don't know. I mean, if someone's an alcoholic but they're truly grateful, that could probably be allowed. But the main thing is that idea about working, and how I really do think the miserable and the grumpy and the angry people in the world who aren't grateful and all that stuff, they should obviously be paid less, but they should also have to work more. Whereas people who are good, conscious, kind, caring people should be paid higher, and they should be given less amount of work to do, less hours work to do. I think we've talked about this before. It would all be calculated via the Neuralink. As I said, you would be paid based on a combination of your job and you as a person, but it would mainly just be you as a person. It wouldn't really be your job. You know, you could be a CEO but a horrible person, and you'd make just like a living wage. You wouldn't make like extra money just because you're a CEO if you're a terrible person. Because that's like a huge issue nowadays, is a lot of people are good at making money, but they're bad at being a human being. And that just makes absolutely no sense. So if you have mass surveillance and all thoughts, and more importantly than thoughts, actions recorded and scored, you can start to pay people properly, because there could be somebody who is not working like a high difficulty job, but they're a very good person and they deserve more. But again, that also would be avoided in this system, because there's also that issue of people slipping through the cracks, where in the future, you know, you would either be forced to or not to go to college automatically. It wouldn't be this voluntary system that tends to just favor who's ever rich. Even if you're stupid, you can probably still just go to college just because you're rich. Whereas somebody who's poor but smart is a much less likely to go to college for, you know, multiple reasons. So a lot of this stuff would actually be fixed, like in the first place anyways. You wouldn't really need to. But yeah, I think you got the premise of what I'm saying. But yeah, of course, I think people who are less grateful for things, they shouldn't have as much money. And people who work should not, they should have to work more. If they're less grateful, more miserable, grumpy, bad people, they should have to work more than people who are better people. And yeah, so it's not really communism. I mean, maybe what I'm talking about is more of like a post, like it's like whatever would be after that, right? Because yeah, I don't really think communism would make that much sense. I mean, it's still abolishing private property. Like you really wouldn't have private property, because if you became a bad person overnight, your whole bank account would just get wiped, you know, proportionately. So there's no private property, but communism is really based around work, and my philosophy is really based around worth. It's not based around work. It's getting past paying people for work and paying people for their worth, which is obviously not just their job. Anyways, it's been schla, but now it's time to buy schla. So, see ya, schla.